be going straight on to the session 4, which is the second panel discussion. And this will be the last major component of this conference. For this session, we're looking at ensuring sufficient financing required for mobilizing both domestic, international, and international resources from the public and private sectors. So this session, this panel discussion is titled Mobilizing Resources, Financing Mangrove Conservation and Restoration. And to chair this session, kindly to chair this session is the Deputy Program Manager for SDN in the person of Ifeoma Ndekwu. All right. Okay. Please, we are back in session. I know those conversations are quite interesting to us, but we need to return back to session. We need to resume this conference fully and officially. Can I kindly request that all side meetings should stop at this point in time as we make welcome Ifeoma Ndekwu. I hope I got the pronunciation well. Please help me make welcome Ifeoma Ndekwu. Am I correct? Thank you very much. Deputy Program Manager, SDN. So to join her, we have Dr. Akinyemi Akinyuga, Technical Advisor to the Governor Ekiti State. You are most welcome. You are most welcome. Please help me welcome him. Join me to welcome him. And next to him is Nick Thompson, Senior Policy Advisor, West Africa Blue. Yes, Nick has been around all since the morning and been soaking in all the conversations, and I'm sure it's going to be quite a robust one from him. Two more panelists to join them. Dr. Aroloye Numbere has been around, he's spoken earlier, and he'll also be joining this conversation, this panel discussion. Kindly make welcome Dr. Aroloye Numbere. You're welcome, sir. And last but not the least, Dr. Joseph Onoja would also be joining in this panel discussion. Again, similar to the last, please make welcome, join me to make welcome these panelists as they come up. Thank you. All right, so similar to the last panel discussion, the first panel discussion, they will be spending just about 10 minutes each or less with their initial interventions, as will be chaired by the chair of the panel discussion. Do we have a microphone for the panel discussion chair, please? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Hello.
About you, Madam Chair.
Great. Once again, good afternoon, everyone. And many thanks to SDN and USAID for putting together such an insightful conference to discuss mangroves. I know we've had all of our sessions, where we've looked at the state of mangroves at different countries, and we've also discussed with different organizations and state governments as well to look at, some of the actions they have taken in terms of mangrove conservation and reservation. But at the end of it all is money, because mangrove conservation, mangrove restoration requires funding, and heavy funding at that. I did my little research, and what my research shows is that it costs, depending in developed countries, it costs between $23,000 to $45,000, per acre for a mangrove restoration project. And in developing countries, it costs an average of $8,000, to fund per acre of a mangrove restoration project. But to begin this session, I looked up a very interesting quote from Her Excellency Rizan Al Mubarak, the UN Climate Change High-Level Champion for COP28. And she said, unlocking capital at scale for mangroves will be critical. Long-term flows of public-private philanthropic capital are needed to keep healthy mangroves standing, create nature, people-positive businesses and livelihoods, and regenerate and restore degraded mangroves. Finance providers must step up. They cannot do it alone as well. Policymakers, local communities, indigenous people, NGOs, civil society will all have a vital role to play. So it is against this backdrop that I will ask my first question to Mr. Thompson, who's got extensive experience as Senior Policy Advisor at West Africa Blue. So, Mr. Thompson, West Africa Blue, focuses on sustainable development in coastal regions. I've looked at the work you're doing in Sierra Leone and the work you're also doing in Guinea-Conakry, and it's quite impressive. May I ask, to tell us some of the challenges you faced in developing these projects and what lessons we can apply to Nigeria for experiences in other countries?
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you to Florence and the SDN and USAID also for hosting this event. And thank you to all to joining us. It's been a real, it's all I said, I've been here all day and it's been a real privilege and pleasure to join this conference. As everyone says, I'm from West Africa Blue. We are a private sector developer of large-scale community-centric mangrove restoration and preservation projects, with our primary experience today, as everyone has just said, in Sierra Leone and Guinea. And we are also exploring projects in the Gambia, Cameroon, and we hope here in Nigeria, in the Delta region, for all the reasons that have been explored this morning. I'll come on to answer the question about the challenges and opportunities, but I say that partly also with due humility, that I think I'm probably the person in the room who knows the least about the challenges of mangrove development in this country in particular, or particularly this region, or this region meaning the Delta. So we're very excited about the opportunity of working here, but we're very aware of and alive to the challenges. So I thank participants again for all that I've learned this morning, and to recognize the humility that I think I know the least about the Delta, certainly on this panel here. Florence said in the end of the last session that what we've learned this morning is sobering, which I think is the right word. And I agree, it is sobering. The scale of the challenge is clearly daunting. At the same time, coming from a private sector perspective and looking at carbon credits, and without therefore wishing to be, this is why I said all due humility, knowing the Delta region, at least on the panel, without being unduly naive, I think there is also a great opportunity, and that carbon credits do create a great opportunity to develop sustainable mangrove, not just mangrove, but in our case, mangrove preservation and restoration projects that not just overcomes some of the environmental challenges and preserve mangroves as the unique resource that they are, but also create a sustainable revenue stream for communities that so dearly need it. So there is something exciting within the challenge, and that's where we as West Africa Blue comes from the private sector perspective. And I'd love to draw out in the course of the conversation the role of the private sector and where the private sector adds value. Directly to your question, the challenges are numerous. These are complex environments, clearly no more so than the Delta, but even in Sierra Leone and Guinea, different environments, but very, very complex. It's important, having noted, and I would stress the opportunity of carbon credits, is important not to see them as quick wins. They are complex projects, they are long-term projects. They have to be long-term projects for the carbon gains to be permanent and therefore real. We're not talking 2 to 3 years. We're talking from a commercial perspective, 5 years to break even, 10 to 15 years to get money back, the initial investment back, 50 years to genuinely see permanent reductions in carbon. So these are carbon credits are a genuine opportunity, but these are not quick wins. These are long-term complex problems, and therefore, and this is the final point, and I'll hand back because we can discuss this more. A lot of the complexity partly is, of course, to do with the challenges that have been discussed this morning and the need to start bottom up with hard-to-reach communities. Of course, that brings a whole series of practical and other obstacles, but the particular challenges then come from what is a very nascent policy environment. For good reasons and for obvious reasons, governments are finding their way through what is a very, very new and rapidly changing policy environment. From an investor standpoint, that creates uncertainty and that creates risks that are difficult to manage in a long-term perspective. And therefore, the area where we are most keen to work with government partners on at a national and at a local level is ways in which we can, using the international framework, Paris Agreement, Article 6, et cetera, but create as much stability and legal certainty as possible so that we can work with our investors, with donors, with the philanthropic community. And we're a private sector actor, of course, but we have a blended finance approach that seeks to crowd in a range of different financial instruments and financial sources, but to do so, a stable policy environment is really, really key. And that's something that we're very keen to work with partner governments on.
Just to probe a little further, now in Sierra Leone and in Guinea, does there exist a regulatory framework around the carbon markets or carbon trade that guides the work that you do? I know Nigeria is trying to put together one. So, I mean, how does that help the work you do if one exists?
Where it exists, it's extremely helpful, is a short answer. And for the purposes of this panel, I've been reading up on what Nigeria has been doing. I don't pretend to be, again, fully up to speed, but it looks very promising and very exciting, and it's certainly a conversation we'd love to have with government colleagues, if there's any in the room today. It is a conversation that we engage with very early on with all of the governments that we work with. Sierra Leone and Guinea are themselves developing a regulatory framework. It's not current, or not all aspects of it are yet currently in place to do with Article 6 compliance, trading arrangements, national carbon registries, et cetera. Most governments are looking to similar types of policy framework. Ghana, which is where I live, I don't say that for this reason, but Ghana is the most advanced, I think, in this region in policy terms. But the government of Gambia, with whom we work, recently published a bill. I know the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Environment in Sierra Leone are looking at developing the policy framework. And from what I can see of the emerging policy framework here, a number of governments, for understandable reasons, are following very similar lines, which is very encouraging. And we would want that to move not as quickly as possible, because I'm a former government civil servant myself in the UK. Quick policy is sometimes bad policy. And these policy frameworks do need to endure, they need to last. So move as quickly as possible, but don't rush.
Many thanks for your response. So let me move on to Dr. Akinyemi, who is the technical advisor to the governor of Ekiti State. And you have been involved in some pioneering work around forestry protection and trying to see how you can utilize investments in carbon credits. Could you just quickly tell us about your experience and what you could offer to those, looking to develop similar projects in other parts of the country, but, with a focus on mangroves?
Madam Chair, if I may just quickly interrupt, I would just like to quickly recognize the presence of Honorable Tessa Ubo, Benue State, representing Benue State, Kwande Oshongo, who is also the Deputy Chair, House Committee on Environment, and also the Chairman for Student Loan. Please join me to welcome him. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Madam Chair, over to you.
Thank you, Honorable. It's a pleasure having you here with us. Please go ahead, Dr. Akinyemi.
Thank you very much. And thank you to USAID, SDN, and at this program. I think the first thing I'd like to highlight is that it's important to say that public institutions or state governments are not totally helpless. A lot of times when we go So the city for finance or financial support, we don't tend to look inward to see some of the things we can start up with to basically to risk financial investments coming from private capital. And why do I say this? When we, in our experience engaging private sector people, local, international, local, a lot of times they ask us for data. And what you find out is that in a lot of states, we are operating on maps that were done during the colonial period. A lot of us don't have the current up-to-date maps that can really explain what the situation is. And so oftentimes people are looking at these investments and they're looking at it like a black box. So in our experience in the States, one of the fundamental things we began to do beyond just rewriting the forestry law which passed in 2016 was to also ask ourselves what are the things, the load and the inputs that we can put a little money for the states to do and then get something just to engage private sector investors in things as and their capacities within the country to do these things. Things as fundamental as land use, land cover maps, trying to get support from the state government to complete technical maps. And some of these things might appear to be not so controversial, but they are basically mental towards engaging people. So to set that phenomenon is called public-private partnership. Things like the public has to come first. Set that environment that can make the private sector people committed to what you want to do. And again, it's important that the leveraging of what makes it. Part of course is to be patient capital. It shouldn't just be patient capital, it should be variant capital and also effective capital. And so we shouldn't just invest from the perspective of just letting people do, because when we talk about carbon credits, we're looking at projects like what is realistically return on the investment. Maybe 20, 30 years. But again, you have government cycles of 4 years, and in a democracy such as the one operating in Nigeria, you need to show people what you have done in 4 years. And sometimes this translates to Naira and Kobo. You need to show people that this can give Naira and Kobo within the shortest possible time. So thinking around the models to operate, not only to deliver short-term gain, but also keeping an eye on the long-term objective, ensuring that both short-term, mid-term, and long-term objectives are aligned and achieved.
Thank you very much, Dr. Akinyemi. Now, please moving on to Dr. Joseph Onoja, the DG of the Nigerian Conservation Foundation, which is one of the premier, conservation foundations in Nigeria. There seems to be a lot of growing interest right now around mangrove conservation and restoration. It wasn't, the interest level wasn't this much, maybe several years ago, where I've met a few couple of persons, implementing such projects saying, I'm funding this, out of my own pocket or based on, just contributions. So with this growing interest internationally, how can NGOs position themselves, to secure funding, to implement, such a needful project, especially in the Niger Delta region?
Thank you very much. So, one of the things that needs to be done is for NGOs to have a broader approach in the sense of when you talk about mangrove conservation, you're not just talking about mangrove conservation in itself alone. With that, there are other things that you can tie your projects around. For instance, when you look at it from the health benefit from it, if these local community go and cut down mangroves, they are going to use it to cook. There's a health implication on their health. The time probably the women folk go out there to go and cut down trees, it's time for them to have used to develop themselves to learn a skill and so on. You can tie that also to your project. And then you talk about the mangrove, the habitat degradation and things like that. So by the time you put all these things together, you'll be able to have a stronger case than just looking at, oh, I want to restore the habitat. You want to restore the habitat for what reason? So value must be there. Sometimes we chase money and forget about the value. By the time you project the value, in fact, sometimes the money you are looking for may even be, may not be as much. I mean, the money you're looking for, when you project the value, you find out that you have undervalued yourself in terms of the money. But to showcase the value that you're going to have with this project you want to do, the funder may even look at it that they may quantify your value much more than the money you're asking for. So I think rather than looking at the money itself, when you look at the value you hope to bring out of this project you want to implement, it goes a long way. Another way to do it also is to tie it with the development goals, the development index and things like that. For instance, the SDGs, you have the conventions, you can tie all of this together so that if you implement these projects, what are you going to do other than just for the habitat, mangrove restoration, habitat restoration, and so on? Are you talking about SDGs 13, 14, 15? Are you talking about reduction of poverty? Are you talking about improving health, just as I mentioned, and all of this? So it helps to be able to make your proposal robust, and helps your argument more robust to be able to set these points. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Noja. And I hope NGOs in the House took note of that. Value and tying your projects to SDG goals. Very, very valuable. Very quickly, Dr. Naberi, how can international development agencies and local governments collaborate more effectively, to ensure a steady flow of resources for long-term restoration conservation?
Okay, thanks for giving me this opportunity to make my contribution. I think in terms of international, collaboration, at least from being somebody coming from the academia, I'll just draw an example to what we are experiencing in terms of funding. Like most of us know that there's lack of funding in research, just like what my colleague talked about. You see a lot of projects that can change situations, that are innovative, but there is lack of support, even within the school and outside the school environment. Let me just give an example. Like we are talking about, Nipa palm being waste, and some places are talking about it being useful in some countries like Indonesia and so on. I will just give you a scenario. Like in my school, University of Port Harcourt, I head a department, biology, biotechnology, but you'll be shocked. We don't even have a test tube. It's just answering department by name. Now, in that department that I'm heading, it's just a kind of baby department. It just, we don't even have final year. We just have levels 1 to 4. But among the staff I have, the lecturers, I have somebody that graduated first class, best graduating student. Now, this guy has used grapes to produce wine, just locally, local fabrication. Now, there's an experiment that is ongoing. So I set up a committee. Why not we see ways whereby we can use the Nipa palm to produce Nipa palm wine? And the theoretical aspects have been complete, but do you know that for the past, since I set up that committee, for the past 4 months, we have not been able to do anything because we don't have the funding, we don't have the equipment, absolutely nothing. So I think a forum like this will be a way of also projecting this situation we find out. Because when you talk about collaboration, international and local, they say charity begins at home. So even the schools are not even funding research. Talk about going to Mangrove to carry out, research. So I feel the schools should be more interested and the government should be more interested in sponsoring projects rather than spending money traveling around the world. I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but if I tell you the billions, the millions they spend just going for holidays, traveling around, you'll be shocked. If they just bring like 5% and put it into research, I'm telling you, Nigeria will go places. Just recently in February, I won an award in Yale University, innovative research that I did. You'll be shocked. I didn't even have any equipment, but based on my knowledge, I brought out a theory, the soil replacement technique I mentioned earlier, how to drive away the Nipah palm in the Niger Delta. I did a little experiment and I saw that soil was very important in terms of eradicating the Nipah palms. And I did a small, what I call swan box experiment. It's published. And I discovered that when you transplant, there is this kind of cross-planting. When you take Nipah palm, plant it in mangrove soil, it grows. But when you take the mangrove seedlings, plant it in Nipah palm soil, it doesn't grow. So the soil has a relationship. That's why I came up with that soil replacement technique. But do you know that after doing that laboratory experiments, I had no funding to take it to the fields, to go and do it and experiment it. And if it works, then we can do it in a very large way. And in that manner, we can translate it with all these things we are talking about, carbon credit. There's, in life, there's what they call domino effect. There's chain reaction. The little thing you do in the lab can translate to something that can be beneficial to the society and the community. Just like in one of my slides, I talked about the different environmentalist view. When you look at in terms of protecting, biodiversity, we have developmental view, we have protectionist view, and we have the conservation view. But most times they're interested in just developing because they have money to make from those projects. But they're not talking about conservation. Now, when we come to conservation, you have to have a vision. What is your vision in conservation? The concept. Because everything we do in science has its bedrock theoretically before you go out to practice it. If you don't have good bedrock in terms of theory, you go to the field, you make mistakes. And that's what is happening presently in all this remediation they're talking about. There are many things I would have wanted to say, but I don't want to say it because it will look as if those contractors will come after me. Because most of the things they are doing there in the field, they are already dead on arrival. Because they go there, plant mangrove seed, in 2 years, it dies. Mangrove is not a single species, it's a community. When you're talking about mangroves, and most of the remediation they are doing, they're just planting red mangroves, but we have red, black, white mangroves. Just like population, if you have diversity, there will be progression. There will be an increase. But when you have a mono-specific environment, when situations come in, it wipes everything. And that's what they are doing. And they don't come to us, the academics. They don't come to us for advice. They just pay contractors, give them billions and make millionaires, and they go to the field and do things that are unworkable. So how can international agency come and meet us and start sponsoring something that has already failed at inception? So I think, just my own contribution, I'm not actually a finance-driven person in terms of this restoration thing, but I'm telling you from the academic point of view. And I feel we can benefit if we can invite that from this conference. So at this point, I will just take it easy and hand over to the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Namberi. He was about to set this place on fire, wasn't he? All right. So I'm tempted to move on to my next question, but I just want to stay on this just a little bit because unfortunately, Dr. Akinyemi, you seem to be the only government person on this panel. So, but he mentioned something which is very critical, which is research. And unfortunately, as a Nigerian, it's not just about mangrove or Nipah palm. It cuts across everything. There seems to be this lack of interest around research. I mean, based on your own experience working with government, I mean, why is this so, or what can be done to ensure that government conducts more research before an intervention?
Thank you very much. Short answer. Researchers in Nigeria tend not to speak the language of government. I taught for 3 years. before putting out the going to students. ending up in academics. And the thing is that we really need to learn to see, to be empathetic, like I said, to see from the other side of the field, to think the way the politicians are thinking or the governor is thinking, and be able to present your case in a way that gets the support to give you funding for work. And of course, you have to be lucky to have someone that listens, and is ready to back you up. Another thing to mention is sometimes it's not the big money that contributes. The odd £5,000, the odd 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 pounds or dollars. If it's well utilized, you can create multiple streams out of it. I'll give you an example. We started something in Ekiti State. It was like citizen science. We got people together, got them to go on the road, survey the area, take a free hack on biodiversity, iron insurance, and then created a buzz around it. Got a few people interested, put together basic data, and with this basic data, we approached our links and our network in the UK. And with that, we got about 32,000 pounds to expand that work. Because we tried applying for a grant that was in the millions of pounds, and we realized that we may not have enough data to be very competitive. What we did is go local, DIY, get basic things, approach a number of people. Now we have 50,000 pounds. Next year, we'll be pushing for maybe $300,000. So that incremental, gradual way of building it is very, very important. The thing with government is you need to be able to speak directly, not just on the long term, which forest issues are. You need to be able to show your principal how this, affects people on the short term, and how you can galvanize support for your principal on the short term for this long-term forestry project. If you are not able to present that to him clearly, then you have a difficult case of getting support from him to back the project. So I want to encourage Dr. Aroloye. It's you said you're not a finance person, but you really need to think finance when you do projects like this. You need to think finance, you need to think conservation, you need to think development, you need to think in a very broad, with a very broad perspective, to be able to appeal to all the broad spectrum. It's like Venn diagram. In a Venn diagram, that thing in senior secondary school, SS1 thing. There's the politician, there's the governor, there's the APC and people. There is the academics here. There is the technical people here. There's the ministry. You need to be able to fit everybody into that kind of Venn diagram. Let everybody see where the common point, where everybody intersects. And the slice of the pie might go differently, but there should be something in it for everybody.
Solid talk, Doctor. Thank you very much. But let me quickly move into Mr. Thompson again. Now, you coming from,
Madam Chair,
yeah.
I think we're running out of time.
I know, in 5 minutes we'll be done.
Okay,
Yeah.
because this is about the time we need to engage
The audience.
yes.
Okay. I think this is our last question.
Okay.
Yeah, for it. But I just want to hear from private sector, if you could just share with us what are the key challenges and opportunities, out there in attracting private sector investment for mangrove restoration, and how can some of these challenges be addressed, and what are the opportunities out there for private sector to attract funding for mangrove restoration or conservation projects? Yeah.
Thank you. And I'll be quick. Ola, don't worry. Couple of things. I think that from a private sector perspective, what we bring to the table in many ways is the ability to attract different sources of finance and to put different financial structures, financing structures together that communities themselves wouldn't otherwise be able to access. But it is a long-term, patient capital is the right expression. So it does require a blended financial approach for private sector actor like us. That means our own investment. It means some investment at commercial and semi-commercial terms. It means loans. It means grants. We are working with USAID and other of the international donors for grants to support some of the community-based activities, technical assistance, the development of the BSA, etc., etc. So it is about bringing in a range of financial tools, but that's what the private sector can do if done well. I also wanted to emphasize something that Yemi said. There's this really important distinction between a kind of quick buck, creating money in a quick buck sense, but creating economic value. And part of the challenge, candidly, is that the voluntary carbon markets at the moment doesn't have a great reputation. And to me, that is not just a shame, but a sort of major problem, because voluntary carbon markets are fundamental, one of the fundamental tools to address global climate change over the next 10, 20, 30 years. So we have to understand why that lack of confidence is there, and then we have to build that confidence. The opportunity in that, so the kind of, that's why the quick buck kind of position, if I can put it that way, is so damaging, both because it will lead to the wrong sorts of projects, but it undermines the value in carbon credits. But the inverse is also true. The reason the private sector perspective, with the right kind of private sector perspective, can be so powerful is that it will focus in on how you create economic value. You create economic value by having high integrity credits. High integrity credits doesn't just mean that they've done well, it means that the communities are bought in. And at the end of the day, if you come at it from even if you only come at it from an economic point of view, if the communities are not bought in, the project won't work. I cannot stop the local community from cutting down mangroves. What we can do or seek to do is create the incentives by which the community doesn't want to cut down the mangroves, because they want to do something else and something different, because it creates economic value for them. So that's where I think the role of the private sector is so important in helping to create if done well, not to create a quick buck. That's a false economy, but to create real economic value where the community is bought in, so that they see this is a source of revenue for them. And that's the last thing I wanted to mention is the critical, it speaks to challenges and also your previous question. I talked about the policy and regulatory framework at the government level, but at the community level, the most important thing we're currently working on is the benefit sharing agreement, and the absolute critical importance of getting that benefit sharing agreement right. It's a very live topic, I mean, for us as a company as well as within the sector. And one of the things that we want to do, Abuka mentioned earlier, our Living Labs approach, which is about bringing, being more transparent as a private sector actor and putting our lessons out there. That includes the Mangrove methodology that Abuka works on, but also our approach to the BSA. We want to create much more transparency in the way that private sector actors like us create BSA, benefit sharing agreements. Because with an approach that emphasizes a fair price and a fair approach and a fair share for communities, then we will both hopefully create the community buy-in that is necessary with short-term and long-term incentives for the reason that Yemi had said, create transparency that shapes the market, and then create the stability and the policy stability that we need to know that our investments are stable over the long term.
Please a round of applause for the panel. Thank you. All right, audience, over to you. Questions?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I think we should go to, I'm seeing this hand that's just raised for the, two of them raised for the first time. I won't go to the doctor yet. And I'm hoping that these are not doctors also, because they have a way of asking questions and answering and then still asking you another question. All right, so I'll start with the madam at the front, the lady at the front.
Please introduce yourself and then mention who you're directing your question to. That'll be very helpful. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And I think first I'd like to congratulate SDN and USAID for convening this very important discussion. My name is Folusho Ajayi Adelekon. I work with the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, and I coordinate our environmental crime portfolio, which we're implementing in Nigeria. I found the discussions really very enlightening and seeing some cross-cutting areas with our current work that we do in Nigeria. But in the course of the discussions, through the entire course of the day, I haven't heard about the existence of a national plan, for instance, for mangrove restoration or anything of the sort. It seems as if we have a lot of people doing great work, but there doesn't really seem to be an articulated plan for how we tackle this. And because there's so many other people doing great work, I've seen some pockets of conflicts, or we're not being carried along. I think what we need to consider, if that doesn't already exist, is a plan, a policy document to articulate the national approach to mangrove restoration and protection. And then that way we can then, that plan should of course ideally carry along all the different relevant stakeholders, from the communities to the local governments to the states to the national agencies, with the role, and articulate clearly the roles of each partner. And this would also be, and also the CSOs as well, who are already doing great work. This would be useful also for CSOs and the governments to also seek funding where, for instance, there's limited government funding. Having such a document that articulates the role of each stakeholders helps to better tackle the problem in a strategic way. And I think that's something that we need to be considering. Maybe key stakeholders working in this field, I understand that there's a national or an international mangrove day coming up. Maybe this is something we need to really consider, because it seems like a really big problem. And I'm surprised that, for instance, we don't even have representatives of the Ministry of Marine and Blue Economy here, because this is something that I think it's sort of within their purview and their mandate. I think when we have these types of discussion next time, maybe we should consider involving these people and start thinking about a plan to tackle this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Kindly introduce yourself and your intervention.
Thank you, the organizers of this workshop. I must say that this workshop is timely and very apt. I am Professor H.O. Nwankwala of the Department of Geology, Rivers State University, Port Harcourt. We all know, just as we've been discussing since, that systematic restoration, systematic protection, and systematic conservation of mangrove is capital intensive, as we have heard all through. A lot of pockets of studies have been done, and we saw many of them. I think there is need for synergy and collaboration in mangrove research efforts. Just recently, one of my supervisees carried out a research on carbon stock estimation in sediments, mangrove sediments in parts of Gokana local government area. And I want to tell you that the result has been very useful. And again, we also have carried out research on evaluation of oil spill pathways using genetic biomarkers in some locations, oil spill locations in the Niger Delta. And such projects were very, very capital intensive. I want to ask, what is the practical sustainable funding options we will recommend that will be viable, especially to addressing those multidisciplinary studies in this regard? Thank you so much.
Okay. Do you want us, Madam Chair, do you want us to take everyone because of time, and then?
Yeah, let's take everybody's questions.
So
But sorry,
we-
Prof, who's your question directed at, please? Or anybody? Okay. See, you didn't want a doctor, you got a prof. So So there we
So
go.
Can I
All right.
jump you to, I just want to recognize those who have not spoken since morning. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, everyone. It's been such a didactic deliberation and conversation thus far. My name is Blessing Abanilim. I'm from the National Agency for Science and Engineering Infrastructure, NASENI. And basically, part of our mandate is, to invest in technological development using science and engineering infrastructure. My question is really quick. So we've heard about the key stakeholders. For agencies such as NASENI, that it's not part of the key stakeholders, but we are actually working on projects to invest in local ventures that can develop carbon credit projects, as well as policy advocacy and capacity building. How can we, key into what is happening? How can we key into this? How can we be part of the conversation? What can non-key stakeholders, such as NASENI, that have interest in carbon credit and, building a green industry in Nigeria, how can we be part of the conversation? And what can we do to be part of this conversation? So just throughout the conversation, I'm just thinking, so what can we do? How can we be part of this? Because that's one of the major reasons why I've been sent here. Because when we talk of mangrove conservation, we're talking about, okay, out of that, we're going to develop carbon credits. What can we do with that? So my agency thought it wise that I be part of this conversation, listen to the conversation, and most importantly, bring back recommendations, actionable recommendation on how the agency can be part of the conversation and what to do. Sorry, I don't know his name, but the speaker from the government mentioned how at the end of the day, we have like a very long-term goal. So what are the short-term activities or activations or initiatives you can pull through, bearing in mind the democratic, like 4-year tenure, some just have 5 years tenure. I know it's a long process, but what are those short-term goals? He kept on talking about it, but I think maybe I missed it. Or what are those short-term goals that we can key into to be part of the conversation?
Thank you, ma'am. I go to the other. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. My name is Mariam Booker from the Federal Ministry of Marine and Blue Economy. As you know, the ministry is new, so we're still putting our frameworks and structures in place, and definitely this is something we'll be looking at as we are stakeholders in this as well. Thank you.
So we won't be able to take additional questions. We'll go back to the panel. Thank you.
Yeah, but I think if you do have questions, the panelists are still here, so we can have conversations during lunch and all. But I've asked Mr. Thompson to respond to the question from the lady from the National NASEN, and of course, your question to Dr. Akinyemi will also be answered. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be quick in answer to Blessing's question from NASEN. I think the first thing to say is that from a developer point of view, we welcome engagement from actors like yourselves, the kind of non-critical, I think you said. It's all critical from my point of view, so we would welcome that engagement. I think the role is perhaps the way to think about, the way I think about our role as a developer of these projects is in some ways as a hub. We don't do it all ourselves by any stretch of the imagination. We are a hub through which a whole range of actors that are needed to make complex, multidisciplinary, as a colleague said, projects come to life over the very long term. So in an implementation sense, that means working with local NGOs who have the networks into and embedded within the local communities in order to build the FPIC processes to get the communities on side in the first place, build the livelihood programs, and much of the rollout that we do is through local NGOs. But then similarly, we want to be working with a range of funders and a network of funders to help bring the financing together. And our role is to be that hub that can create the package, if you like, of actors and different types of financing that makes the project work. So we would very, very much welcome working with yourselves and organizations like yourselves. And therefore, as a second, and again, very brief answer, I just really welcome this event. And someone else mentioned earlier about not just USAID because they're here, but international agencies like USAID, the role of convening is just so important. Because we can't know everyone, and not everyone will know an individual private sector developer like us. But the more that the international community or the national government or local government can play a convening role to bring people together to create the environment in which that collaboration can happen for real, I think is so important. And that's a way also of saying again, thank you very much for organizing today. It's been a great event.
Dr. Akinyemi?
So quite quickly, short-term initiatives, and I will be very good. The carbon project, the carbon credits, huge money in 10 to 20 years. We have a 4-year budget from government side. One way to do this is first to think about how you can, bring in part of the money that's supposed to go to the community, which is supposed to be paid within 7 years. You can begin to pay year 1 or year 2, discounted over the lifetime of the project. So to show your principal that we're actually earning money from year 1 and year 2. And we ensure that that money goes to the community directly. With that, you engage the local community. They can actually see the Naira and Kobo in their hands, and they can use NGO to dispense that kind of funds. And the second thing is the one that's the livelihoods project. We don't want them to cut down the mangrove. We want to give them an alternative, and that alternative can be done in the first year. And so again, local community ownership. I like what Nick said about the fact that high value credit is the one that the local government provide. I also serve as project coordinator for NEMA, the World Bank project. And we did afforestation across different parts of the state. But we found out that the places where the trees survive the most were the places where there is a strong farming community around the forest reserve. And if you engage them very strongly, you have a higher chance of getting the trees to survive. So those two things can work very well. Thank you.
Once again, please a round of applause for the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Once again, please a round of applause for the chair and the panel. They will take a group photograph quickly. And while they're doing that, we want to say a big thank you to every one of us.